I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. We're in the midst of the King Trump, Tribulation Trump's possible fourth indictment falling this week down to Fonnie Willis, down in Atlanta, Georgia. And there's a lot of talk going around. There's a whole lot of people saying they don't believe Trump's guilty. A lot of people saying he is guilty. People running against Trump for the nomination, the Republican nomination, are supporting him, saying there's all a witch hunt, the deep state, a whole lot of stuff going on that's absolutely incredible for anybody's ears to listen to. However, Judge Luttig, who also is a very conservative judge who served on the Fourth Circuit, very well respected among judges across America, gave what I would say the most cameo analysis of what's happening constitutionally, what's happening with Trump, and what we can potentially expect to happen with more of the as the indictments and the trial dates get close, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm asking you there to bring up that clip, and I just listen to it. I'll leave my mic open, but and this way you'll get a clear idea how to protect yourself beyond what I've said to you about King Obama and King Trump.
A momentous week for you, sir. I know that you were not looking at all to be part of history on January 5th and January 6th of 2020, but you were. You're not named in the document, but your fingerprints are kind of all over it because Mike Pence had the courage to continue to say what he had to say despite the pressure that Donald Trump and his attorneys were putting on him because you had told his attorney, this is a non-starter.
Thank you, ATLAH, for having me on this morning. This is a tragic day for America. The world will now bear witness to history as the first American president goes on trial for grave offenses against the United States. The day is all the more tragic because the former president chose to inflict this day and this moment on the nation and on the world. On any given day since January 6, 2021, the former president could have avoided and prevented this indictment and prosecution and trial. We now know the former president did not want to avoid prosecution for these offenses. He wanted Jack Smith to indict him, prosecute him, and try him for these grave offenses to prove to the world that he did win the 2020 presidential election. That makes this a very tragic day in American history, and it's a very tragic day in world history, frankly, ATLAH.
Judge, you're very familiar with things like these indictments, and I want to read, the other day I read the whole thing as part of a podcast, and anybody who's watching this can just use that QR code in the corner to hear it. But you're very familiar with this type of thing, and I think it's really, really important to note that within the first couple of pages of the indictment, Jack Smith and his team state very clearly that Donald Trump, under the First Amendment, had every right to doubt the outcome of the election, to challenge the outcome of election, to call for recounts, to call for audits, and to take the matter to court in order to litigate what he may have thought was an unfair outcome to the election. He did all of those things. There were audits, there were recounts, there were court cases, and they all came back with the same conclusion that there was no outcome determinative fraud in the 2020 election.
Now, before Judge Luttig responds to Velshie's question regarding the fact that Trump, he did exercise his constitutional rights and to take the matter to court and use the court and the systems that are in place in the American political electoral system to discover where was he cheated out of the election. He had the opportunity, and he did that 60 different times in 60 different courts and venues, and each one, except for one, came up dry. But before that answer, I want to just respond to what Judge Luttig has said, is that Trump has chosen to do this and it labels it as a very dark time for America. and for the world. And it is. People all around the world are now under this. And Trump is just having a really good time. I think that what we have to also understand, we keep in mind, the component I would like to, Judge Luttig, it speaks absolute truth. I just would like to add, we're in the tribulation, and Trump is tribulation Trump. We need a volcanic kind of earthquake. Trump is, in the sense of spiritual, constitutional, political, Trump is a multitudinous volcano earthquake spewing lava everywhere. Rather than MAGA, it's lava. And really, he's not even in control of himself, Trump. The prophecy of the tribulation is controlling this matter. But Judge Luttig gives some great examples. Mr. Engineer, bring the sound back up again.
His supporters are claiming that that's just First Amendment stuff. He had the right to say all that stuff. What's the distinction here? What's the part that he had the right to do, and when did it turn into stuff that it is alleged that he did not have the right to do?
This is critically important, Ali. Jack Smith anticipated that the former president's primary defense would be under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. He crafted the indictment itself and the specific charges and counts in that indictment so as to walk around the First Amendment defense that he knew the former president would assert. So, as a consequence, the former president does not have a First Amendment defense to any of these charges that have now been brought against him by the grand jury.
I want to talk to you about a Truth Social post. I don't tend to like to do this thing. I'm not on Truth Social. I suspect you're not either. But in a post yesterday, Donald Trump responded to the new details about Mike Pence. Things that are included in the indictment. Donald Trump wrote that Pence has, quote, gone to the dark side. I never told Pence to put me above the Constitution or that Mike was too honest. He's delusional, and now he wants to show he's a tough guy, quote says. Trump says. Trump was reminded again during his arraignment not to influence jurors, not to intimidate witnesses. Talk to me about all of this, that Donald Trump is taking material from the indictment and challenging it in public. Again, I suppose there are First Amendment rights to do that. What's the line between what you can do and what you can't do as it relates to people who are named in the indictment or people who are prosecuting this case?
Unfortunately, Ali, that Truth Social post comes as no surprise to anyone. In fact, we all expected that kind of thing, and we should expect it every day from now until the end of this trial. The former president in this particular post was referencing the indictment itself, and he does have the right to do that. What has been raised, on day one by the government is that when the government provides the information and materials to the former president and his defense team that the government is required to provide to the defendant, then some of that is likely to include grand jury information that is protected from disclosure under Federal Rule 6E. And it would be, it's a criminal offense to knowingly and intentionally disclose grand jury information publicly. So what happened on day one, as it were, over the weekend, is that when the special counsel saw this post, he sought a protective order from the court. And that protective order was designed and written so as to prevent the former president and his defense team from releasing information that is going to be provided to them, which would be the disclosure of which would be prohibited under law. So as to the post over the weekend, the president had a First Amendment right, if you want to call it that, to write that particular post, and he would always have that right, provided he never discloses protected information.
You and I met while you were in the process of crusading for stronger laws, including the Electoral College Act, sort of a fixing of it to ensure that some of the stuff that happened on January 6th won't happen again. And there have been updates and changes to the Electoral College Act. In your opinion, however, given what you know, given your role in the matter, given what you've read in the indictment, are we in the future protected from a scheme and an effort like we have now seen was underway to overcome the 2020 election? Are we protected against that in the future? Is there enough that has changed where that can't happen again?
That's exactly the right question, Ali, to ask. And the answer, I think, is this. The Congress of the United States in the 11th hour did pass the Electoral Count Reform Act, which amended and clarified and strengthened the act that had preceded it. In addition, as you know well, the plan to overturn the 2020 presidential election depended upon something called the independent state legislature theory of constitutional interpretation. And that issue was joined in the case Moore versus Harper that was decided by the Supreme Court at the end of this last term. And the court roundly rejected that theory. So together with the changes and reforms to the Electoral Count Act, and the rejection of the independent state legislature theory by the Supreme Court, I do not believe that we will experience another January 6th in history. That does not mean that America is out of the woods as to democracy.
Paul's right there. I don't know what Judge Luttig is going to say beyond that, but I agree. I don't think that we're going to ever see this again. My reasons are biblical and spiritual, mainly because we are in the tribulation, and this is just one of the clogs in the wheel of the prophecies of Jesus, a kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation, earthquakes in diverse places, famines and pestilences. I think this is just one of the clogs, but it's going to be an important one. This one will rip the world apart. I sent out a post the other day regarding the fact that the MAGA people have their hearts hardened. I don't know if we actually got that posted. I'll check with Captain LaFleur to find out we actually got that posted. The MAGA people, their hearts have been hardened, and they can't hear truth. In many ways, God has put them in a position to give Trump the fuel that he needs to be able to do what he is doing. He has hardened the hearts the way he did with Pharaoh in Exodus chapter 4, I think, verse 21, thereabouts. But when you see the MAGA people and their zeal, their support of Trump, the reason why they do that is not because Trump is worthy of it. They do it because God has hardened their hearts, and they cannot hear truth. They can't hear it. And so this will, as Judge Luttig is saying, that we will not see this again. But the other thing is that the Obama worshiper, God has turned them over to a reprobate mind, as you will find in the book of Romans, starting in verse 22, where Paul writes about desiring the same sex, rejecting God's gender humanity, and what God does to what Paul writes in Romans chapter 1 is that God has turned the Obama worshiper to a reprobate mind, so they can't hear God either. So in essence, what Judge Luttig is saying, and Mr. Andrew, if you put it back up just one more time, just thank you about my statement, my post. In essence, what the Lord is saying, what the judge is saying, is that this is just one of the clogs. It will not happen again, but it has ripped, and it will rip America apart. And so the King Obama and King Trump, what they're doing right now is not because they're They're really an altruistic, if you will, universal understanding of their followership of Obama or Trump. God has rejected both of these groups. If you are a MAGA person, a supporter of Trump, God has rejected you. If you are a supporter of Obama and supportive of this, if you will, what he has promoted with respect to, God has turned you over to a reprobate mind. Now, give me the freedom of what little we have left before your anger boils and you decide to hurt me. Give me what little is left of the Constitution to say that. That's Bible. I'm not saying this out of my own whole cloth. I'm saying this out of the Word of God. Give me both the religious liberty, the constitutional liberty, the freedom of speech to say these things from the Word of God, that God will harden the hearts of people so that he can destroy them. It's in the Bible. He hardened the heart of Pharaoh so he could destroy Egypt. That's what he did. Give me the freedom to say that. And to those that went the way of homosexuality, the Bible, Paul, the apostle, writes in the book of Romans that those who accepted that lifestyle, that God turned them over to a reprobate mind. That's what the Word of God says. Give me the liberty to say that before you decide to hurt me. What would be noble is for you to give me the last vestige that's left of our Constitution. That freedom of speech, when you start taking it away, especially when I'm basing everything on the Bible rather than just whole cloth or some Nietzsche's philosophy or a Machiavelli or somebody. Give me the opportunity to exercise that wonderful article in Constitution and that First Amendment to say those things. And I repeat, King Trump followers, their hearts are hardened. They can't hear truth if it came from the world's loudest megaphone. The Obama worshiper, God has given them a reprobate mind. They are now wholly and completely certified, decreed as fools. By the Bible, not by me. By the Bible, they have been declared as fools. Mr. India, take us back to Judge Luttig, please.
As long as the former president and his allies and supporters are defending what happened on January 6th and contending that that was necessary in order to further and advance and protect our democracy and our Constitution, then American democracy remains in peril.
Judge, you're certainly one of my favorite conservatives that I ever have on the show, but we have a lot of them on. And yesterday I had Tom Nichols, a conservative writer, on, who said that, while the president is going to be the defendant possibly in 3 cases, which may or may not be settled before the 2024 election, these cases are critically important. However, the election may be more important. In fact, if people have to separate their conservative and liberal politics and their right and left politics from their decisions about whether they wish to cast a ballot to preserve democracy or not in the next election. Do you share that view?
Yes, the what will now be the multiple trials, state and federal, of the former president between now and the election in 2024 will be a spectacle unlike America or the world has ever seen. But those trials stand alone from the election itself. Now, in the election itself, the former president, while he is on trial for these grave offenses, both state and federal, he will be the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party. And so he will be campaigning, as we would expect, on a platform, if you want to call it that the 2020 election was stolen from him. and that he won that election fair and square, when in fact he actually lost that election fair and square. So for 2.5 years, these continuing and persistent claims by the former president and his allies and supporters have laid waste to Americans' confidence in their elections, in their democracy, and in their institutions of law and democracy. The trial and the trials, they will not end that corrosion of American democracy. Neither will the election. But were the former president to win this election, we would have little hope of saving American democracy.
That's very critical. What Judge Luttig just said there is that the trials themselves will not end what has happened. And he's, again, on point and right about that. The trials must take place. I mean, Trump must be tried because the Bible says he's the trigger of the tribulation. Well, God says, the Bible says the tribulation, I say of my own through my communication with Almighty God. He's the trigger of the tribulation. So the trials must happen. The issue here, however, is that it will not solve the problems that we are facing. And while he should be put on trial, I don't think he will ever go to jail. He might. There's another thing here that we're unclear about is his health. I understand he drinks a lot of Diet Coke, eats a lot of Hershey bars, eats a lot of fast food. He's way overweight. He's obese. The pressure that's on him now is incredible, though he puts on a good, stiff upper lip. However, it's not going to solve anything. The MAGA people's minds have been seared by God as hardened, so it isn't going to solve anything. And I don't know if he'll go to jail, and who knows what the presidential, we are a long way before November 3rd or the 6th of the year 2024. We are a long way out. But every day is going to be an intense show of King Trump. And what happens after that? And if he becomes president, which is highly likely, he very well may become president again. It's not unlikely. Some of the polls, I think there was a CNN New York Times poll done last week. I believe that they had Trump and Joe Biden neck and neck or head to head, or Trump slightly winning. So we're at a real interesting position. We're in the tribulation, and Trump is the trigger. Go ahead, Mr. Engineer.
See in the near future.
Judge, we always appreciate the time that you give to provide your analysis, but as I read this week, as I said, you're not named in it, but we know from your testimony and from January 6th what your role was in it, and we are a grateful nation for what you have done. Judge Michael Luttig is the former federal judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. Thank you, sir.
Very high position that he held.